Hidden deep within the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean lies one of the most isolated and enigmatic nations on Earth. Nauru, a tiny island nation, holds a story full of stark contrasts. From once being the wealthiest country per capita to becoming one of the least visited and most impoverished places on the planet. This small, largely forgotten island has experienced a meteoric rise in wealth followed by an equally dramatic fall, shaped by environmental devastation, resource depletion, and political corruption. Despite its small size and isolation, Nauru's history is one that captures the imagination and serves as a cautionary tale of unsustainable practices. In this video, we'll uncover 10 surprising facts about Nauru that will leave you astonished. We'll explore everything from its unique lack of a capital city, to its devastating obesity epidemic, to the consequences of its phosphate boom and bust. By the end, you'll know far more about this forgotten island than most people ever will, and you'll discover why the final fact will leave you utterly speechless. Before we dive into the remarkable story of Nauru, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join World Marvels for more awe-inspiring and eye-opening stories from across the globe. Let's get started. 10. No official capital. Imagine a country without a capital city. While this might seem almost impossible, Nauru is one of the very few nations on Earth that lacks an officially designated capital. Instead, it has what could be called a de facto capital Yaren, a district on the southern coast of the island. Yaren functions as the island's administrative hub, housing Nauru's most important government buildings, including the parliament, embassies, and the only international airport. Despite this, Yaren is far from a bustling metropolis or a formal capital city. This lack of a traditional capital is reflective of Nauru's unusual situation. At just 21 square kilometers, the island is small enough that there's little need to concentrate political power in a specific city. Yaren lacks the infrastructure, population density, and landmarks typically associated with capitals. There are no gleaming skyscrapers, busy business districts, or iconic monuments. Instead, Yaren is a modest area composed of small communities that serve the administrative needs of the country. The absence of a formal capital city might sound strange, but for a country as tiny as Nauru, it makes sense. In a place where everything is close by, having a singular center for government operations isn't necessary. Still, it stands in stark contrast to the towering capitals of other nations like London, Washington, D.C., or Tokyo, making Nauru one of the most unique countries in the world. 9. No military forces. Another surprising fact about Nauru is that it has no standing military force. In a world where nearly every country has an army, navy, or air force, Nauru remains entirely unarmed. With a population of just around 12,000 people, the costs and logistics of maintaining a military would be an impractical burden on the nation's resources. Instead, Nauru has relied on a long-standing agreement with Australia, which takes responsibility for the island's defense. This reliance on foreign protection is not uncommon among small Pacific Island nations. Tuvalu and the Marshall Islands, for example, have similar arrangements with larger nations. Nauru itself has a small police force that handles local law enforcement, ensuring peace and order on the island. But when it comes to external threats, Nauru depends entirely on Australia's military capabilities. While the absence of a military might seem like a weakness, it also speaks to Nauru's peaceful history. The island has largely avoided conflict, and its geographic isolation has kept it away from the turmoil that has engulfed other nations. In many ways, Nauru's pacifist nature is a reflection of its small size, remote location, and focus on internal rather than external affairs. 8. One of the world's least visited countries. Nauru is among the least visited countries on Earth, with fewer than 200 tourists stepping foot on its shores each year. Despite its idyllic location surrounded by the clear blue waters of the Pacific and tropical landscapes, this tiny island remains off the radar for most travelers. The primary reason? Accessibility. Nauru is served by just one airline, Nauru Airlines, and flights to and from the island are limited and expensive. There are only a few flights each week, and the sheer difficulty of reaching Nauru makes it a challenge for even the most adventurous travelers. Beyond the logistical challenges of getting there, Obtaining a visa for Nauru is no small feat. The island has strict visa regulations, and very few countries have embassies that can assist travelers. As a result, fewer than 15,000 people have ever visited Nauru, making it a destination that few will ever see in their lifetime. However, for those who seek the road less traveled, the island's isolation and exclusivity add to its appeal. Despite its beauty, Nauru's tourism industry is almost non-existent. There are few tourist accommodations or activities, and much of the island is marred by the environmental devastation caused by phosphate mining. But for those who do visit, Nauru offers the opportunity to experience one of the world's most secluded and unusual places, a destination that few will ever have the chance to explore. 7. The obesity epidemic. Nauru faces a severe public health crisis, with one of the highest obesity rates in the world. Approximately 80% of the population is classified as overweight, and nearly 40% of Nauruans suffer from diabetes. This health epidemic has its roots in both cultural practices and historical events that have shaped the island's diet and lifestyle. In Nauru's past, being overweight was often seen as a symbol of prosperity and success. Large bodies were considered a sign of wealth and affluence, and this cultural norm influenced the behaviors of the population. However, as Nauru's economy collapsed and its once fertile land was ravaged by phosphate mining, the island became heavily reliant on imported, processed foods. These foods, high in sugar, fat, and calories but low in nutritional value, have had a devastating effect on the island's health. The introduction of sedentary lifestyles, coupled with poor dietary habits, has worsened the situation. Today, many Nauruans suffer from complications such as heart disease, diabetes-related amputations, and other serious medical issues. The government has made efforts to address the crisis, but combating such widespread health issues remains a monumental challenge for the island. 6. Once the richest country in the world. It may be hard to believe, but Nauru was once the richest country on Earth on a per capita basis. In the 1970s, the island's phosphate reserves, which are made from seabird guano and are incredibly valuable in agriculture, generated an immense amount of wealth for the country. Nauru's phosphate was highly sought after, and by 1975, the island's per capita income had reached an astounding $76,000, equivalent to over $400,000 in today's dollars. At the time, Nauruans were wealthier than the average American, and their standard of living was among the highest in the world. During this period, the government provided nearly everything to its citizens. Healthcare, education, and even housing were free, and there were no taxes. Luxury cars like Cadillacs and Land Rovers cruised along Nauru's few roads, and many Nauruans traveled the world, purchasing properties and enjoying extravagant lifestyles. However, this golden era didn't last. The phosphate reserves were depleted much faster than expected, and Nauru's wealth evaporated almost as quickly as it had appeared. Today, Nauru stands as a cautionary tale of what can happen when a country relies too heavily on a single resource. The island's rapid rise and fall serve as a reminder of the importance of sustainability and long-term planning. 5. A short drive around the island. Nauru is so small that you can drive around the entire island in about an hour. The island's road network is just 30 kilometers long, forming a loop around its perimeter. With only a few cars on the island and a single gas station, traffic is nearly non-existent. The roads are basic, but they're sufficient for the island's small population. In addition to its limited road network, Nauru also has a 4-kilometer-long railway that was built to transport phosphate from the mining areas to the coast for export. While this railway was once a vital part of the island's infrastructure, it is now mostly unused, a relic of Nauru's once thriving phosphate industry. Today, the roads and railways stand as reminders of Nauru's rise and fall, and they highlight the island's unique challenges in maintaining its infrastructure. For visitors, the small size of Nauru makes it easy to explore the entire island in a single day. From the pristine beaches to the remnants of the phosphate mines, there's much to see in this tiny but fascinating country. 4. Environmental destruction from phosphate mining. Nauru's vast wealth from phosphate came at an incredibly high environmental cost. Decades of phosphate extraction devastated the island's landscape, leaving large parts of Nauru barren and uninhabitable. The once fertile land was stripped away, replaced by a desolate and rocky wasteland full of craters. Today, the environmental scars left by the mining industry are still visible across much of the island. In the 1960s, the environmental destruction was so severe that Australia even considered relocating the entire population of Nauru to another island. While this plan never came to fruition, it highlights just how bad the situation had become. Efforts to rehabilitate the land have been slow and costly, and much of Nauru's interior remains unusable for agriculture or development. The island's story serves as a warning of how unsustainable resource extraction can lead to long-term ecological damage. Despite the government's efforts to address the environmental destruction, Nauru's landscape will likely never fully recover from the effects of phosphate mining. 3. A country without a capital. As previously mentioned, Nauru is unique in that it lacks a traditional capital city. While Yaren serves as the country's administrative center, it does not function as a formal capital. Yaren is home to government buildings and key institutions, but it lacks the infrastructure and prominence of a typical capital city. In most countries, the capital is a hub of activity, filled with landmarks, large populations, and significant political and economic power. Nauru, however, is too small to support such a city. With a population of just 12,000 residents, there is little need for a large urban center, and the island's administrative functions are spread across small communities. This lack of a capital city is just another way that Nauru defies convention and stands apart from the rest of the world. It's one of the many quirks that make the island such a fascinating place to study and understand. 2. The Nauru Regional Processing Center. In recent years, Nauru has gained international attention for its role in hosting the Nauru Regional Processing Center, a controversial detention center for asylum seekers attempting to reach Australia. Established as part of an agreement between Nauru and Australia in 2001, the center has been widely criticized for its poor living conditions and allegations of human rights abuses. Refugees who attempt to reach Australia by boat are sent to Nauru, where they are detained while their claims for asylum are processed. Many of these refugees have spent years living in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, with little clarity about their futures. Human rights organizations like Amnesty International have called for the closure of the detention center, citing the mental and physical toll it has taken on those who have been held there. The detention center has drawn global condemnation and strained Nauru's relationships with other countries. While the facility has provided a source of income for the island, it has also brought unwanted negative attention to Nauru, complicating the island's efforts to rebuild its economy and reputation. 1. Economic collapse after phosphate depletion. The collapse of Nauru's phosphate industry marked the beginning of a long and painful economic decline for the island. As the phosphate reserves ran dry, so too did Nauru's wealth. The government's attempts to diversify the economy failed, and the island found itself facing mounting debt and financial instability. Corruption and mismanagement only worsened the situation, leaving Nauru in a precarious financial position. In a desperate bid to generate revenue, Nauru turned to offshore banking and other questionable ventures, but these efforts were largely unsuccessful. Today, Nauru is one of the poorest countries in the world, with few prospects for economic recovery. The island's tragic story of wealth squandered and environmental destruction serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of over-reliance on a single natural resource. Nauru's history is one of extremes, from immense prosperity to devastating poverty, from pristine beauty to environmental ruin. What surprised you most about Nauru's story? Have you ever heard of or considered visiting this remote island? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Nauru's fascinating past and uncertain future, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to World Marvels for more incredible stories from around the world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next adventure.